Yeah, so I'm presenting on the JPS API Wrapper. I know it's kind of a mouthful, but it's the Jamf Pro Server API Wrapper. I kind of like to name things just so you know what you're getting with the package. So again, I'm Brian Weber. I work at the Chippewa Valley Technical College in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I know Eau Claire is usually associated with Jamf, and we usually like, oh, so you must work there. Like, no, we work in CVTC. Yeah, so like most of our projects, this was born out of a problem. When I first started at CVTC, we had, a handful of scripts, so not a big deal if you copy functions to interface with the API from one to another, but all of a sudden you get a little bit more, all of a sudden they're changing a little bit, and then you just got a mess of code everywhere. Across these projects, we had a lot of per project functions handling API requests. They vary from project to project depending on our needs. And this also led to a lot of wasted time copying code. And the different implementations lead to just confusion across different projects. This also led to wasted time rewriting the same functionality if we needed it in multiple projects. This became especially true when we needed to rewrite the authentication to use tokens instead of basic auth, if anyone else was familiar with changing everything over for that. A lot of the initial stages of this project were born out of, well, we never want to do that again. Yeah, the solution to these problems were the Jamf Pro Server API Wrapper. It consolidates all API requests into one easy package. It solves the problem of having differing functions that handle requests and projects, and the wrapper also handles authentication along with token, refreshing, and revoking. Since the wrapper handles authentication and API requests for you, you can focus on developing the functionality that you need rather than interfacing with the API. With everything consolidated, it also makes it a lot easier for new users to explore and use the Jamf Pro API. Like I mentioned before, this is a Python project, and it does require at least Python 3.6. It's tested up through 3.11. Very heavily recommend you use 3.11 or at least something similar to that. I wouldn't recommend using something that old anymore. And then it does require pip. Pretty much every recent Python install is going to come with this already, though. If anyone's using like Brew or any Linux install, it's going to be real similar, just a package manager. So all we need to do, pip install JPS API Wrapper, and we're good to go. And then just quick aside before we get into actually using the API Wrapper, I do watch a lot of like API sessions just to kind of see like what everyone does with the API. And I notice the recurring question a lot is just kind of dealing with secret usage for, that information we don't really want readily available while we're working with it. So if you're using a CI platform like GitLab CI or GitHub Actions, problems kind of solved for you. They have variables in there that you can just set, and then they're masked for you, ready to go, all good. But especially when you're developing them, or if you're running this locally or on a server, I would generally recommend using environment variables. So when using them locally, the only problem with that is that they will be put onto your command history when exporting them. So you can instead use the command setup hist ignore space. And again, all this presentation, everything will be available later for these commands and stuff. So basically, you can use that to ensure that the leading space is omitted from history. So one problem with that, though, is it's only for that current session. So basically, all we need to do to fix that is just echo it into the ZSHRC file, or bash RC if you're using Linux. And that's basically, if anyone's not familiar with that file, it's basically just like terminal config settings for your user. But yeah, so that'll be saved forever then. And then once we have that, we're just going to use export to set the environment variable. And then basically, if you've ever set a variable in any sort of programming language, Bash, Python, et cetera, it's going to look pretty simple. We're just using export, and the variable name, and then equals the value. But if you notice on the export there, on the second line, we just have that leading space to make sure that the password is not saved in history. Windows, we use set, but I'm not a super savvy Windows user, so I didn't want to put out bad information on how to make sure that wasn't saved in history. Cool. So now that we went on that tangent, can actually kind of take a look at what you need to authenticate. So we're going to want to retrieve that environment information in Python now so that we can actually use it. So we're importing environ from the built-in OS module to retrieve those variables along with the pro module from the wrapper. After that, we're setting the 3 pieces of information we need to authenticate with the wrapper. And if you've used the basic authentication before, I specifically made this so that it's very similar, so you don't have to learn a whole new method. All the access token, all the refreshing and validation is all handled on the back end for you. So when initializing the pro class, we will see that we're using the with statement. And I promise this is about as complicated as it's going to get for the Python stuff if anyone's not super familiar with it. Try to keep it pretty simple for people that are maybe not so familiar. But basically, when initializing the this is because the wrapper has built-in functionality that runs when you enter and exit the class. On entering the class with, it will perform the initial authentication and retrieve the session token. And more importantly, when exiting the with statement, it will automatically revoke that generated token. This is important because if we run into an error, which I mean, if we're dealing with any sort of networked anything, it's going to happen sometimes. This will make sure that when the program exits, it will invalidate that token before it closes out the project or the script. Cool. So I know this was kind of a lot of information all at once, but now that we have all the setup done and the authentication good to go, I'll kind of show you how easy it is to use, get information from and apply different information. So just kind of here, everything up there we kind of already went through, but you'll see it is just one more line. We're just going to do pro.get mobile device and the ID of that mobile device. And then we're just encapsulating it with a little bit of a nicer print method just so it's not looking so garbled. Wrong button there. So this is kind of shortened for brevity. Normally this would return basically every single bit of information that you would see in the Jamf GUI just as JSON information. Again, this is just kind of like a shorter snippet just to kind of show kind of what data you would expect. But you see we just get real basic stuff, name, model, serial, all good stuff we can work with. And then again, it is in JSON format. So cool thing about this is instead of having to rewrite that functionality to say well, we don't want to just get one mobile device anymore. What can I do with one? We want to get all of them. So if you're using this, all you have to do is make it plural. So get mobile device turns into get mobile devices, and then all of a sudden we have every device in the instance. The JPS API Wrapper follows the same CRUD methodology of the Jamf user permissions, so if you're used to setting those, it'll look pretty familiar, which are create, read, or in this case, get, update, and delete. Knowing this, it's very easy to explore the options in the module using the tab completion that comes with most modern editors. Using Visual Studio Code in this one, it's just the one I prefer to use, but By typing in pro.get, we can see all available options, obviously truncated here, but we can kind of see, oh, I keep wanting to press stop instead of go. Here we go. If we do type pro.create, same thing, it's just going to complete, and we can see every single option in there. Yeah, so this format's consistent across both the classic and pro modules, except for some specific cases where I thought it might be important to differ. It's mostly just with replace methods, which is basically just so that you kind of know what you're getting. You don't want to be doing a put method or an update, and then all of a sudden, all of your data is replaced. So full documentation for the wrapper is available on Read the Docs, but this information is generated from the method doc strings from the package. This allows you to see the full documentation of the method from in your editor instead of needing to tab between different programs all the time. So just by hovering over the method, you can see this documentation. So you can kind of see just like a blurb, any parameters that it might need, along with what you're expected to see the return type. So there is one bit of information that is not included directly in the doc strings, just for brevity reasons, which is the syntax for data payloads on create and update methods. I do provide links directly to Jamf's documentations on these requests, though. It's just, I tried both ways, and it got too long to handle eventually. So yeah, if you did notice the data type argument in the previous classic method, it's because the Jamf Pro API uses two different data types, XML and JSON. The Jamf Classic API uses only JSON the Jamf Pro API uses only JSON for all tasks, while the Jamf Classic API can return JSON or XML for GET requests, but exclusively XML when sending data to the API in either create or update requests. If you prefer to work exclusively in JSON, even if you need some functionality that's only available in Classic, I'd recommend a third-party utility called XML-to-dict. It basically just lets you take that XML, convert it into JSON so you can work with it normally, and then dump it back before you upload it. Cool. So we can take a look at, and again, I just want to keep this simple, give you guys kind of the building blocks you need to start and work with something, do something of your own. But so let's take a look at all this info and actually do something with it. Let's just do a simple task of renaming some endpoints. First, we retrieve all the mobile devices using classic.get mobile devices like we did before, and then just digging down into the return JSON to get just the mobile devices. After we have a list of mobile device objects, we iterate over them with just a simple for loop. We want the new names to be the owner's username along with device serial. So we just make a new string with that combined information from the return JSON. After we have that info, we're just going to use classic.create mobile device command method along with the device name option, ID of the device we want to update, and the new name of that device. Along with that, we just have a simple print method just so you can kind of get some output to see like what's happening in the background. So yeah, just want to talk about the kind of the future of the project. Thanks to the Jamf beta program, the updates for this, we usually do have the new endpoints added same day of the new release, other than like extenuating life circumstances. But I do unit testing along with manual testing of endpoints to ensure that things work. But if you do notice a bug, I mean, anyone that's been in the API, you know how many endpoints there are now. I'm sure there's one in there that might not work. But if you do notice anything, I do appreciate issue reports. Or if you're familiar with Python at all, I also accept pull requests. Also, speaking of pull requests, big shout out to the University of Utah. If any of you are familiar with the JCTL or Python Jamf projects, they're actually in the process of using this project as their backend for those requests right now. So again, if you guys are more familiar with that one, I'd suggest waiting a little bit because they're going to be implementing a lot of this right into their project. So yeah. Cool. Yeah, and then again, I just wanted to go like easy examples for people that aren't so familiar with Python. I don't want to overwhelm people before they even try something. But I do have our GitLab up here. I try to open up any project that I think may have use beyond just our specific environment. We use the API to drive a lot of our mobile device extension attributes, including information like if a device is on a signed version, when a device became out of date, current pre-stage scope, stuff like that. We also have scripts out there to move lists of devices from one pre-stage to another, including unscoping and then rescoping to that new group. Teams notifications for your JPS instance going up or down, which sounds like 11, that might be not needed anymore. And then we also have a project out there for syncing regex across like different mobile smart groups and advanced searches. But yeah, everything is written to work on any JPS instance along with listed setup requirements and stuff. And if you're ever finding anything not working, reach out. I'm always there to help. Yeah, but to conclude, the wrapper was made to provide centralized, consistent, and easy access to the powerful Jamf Classic and Pro APIs. This saves a lot of time developing solutions that use the API because you only need to worry about writing the functionality that you need instead of writing functions to handle API requests. And a byproduct of this is that it's a lot easier to explore and use the API without the overhead of writing request handling, making it easier for beginners. I also want to send out a big thank you to the Jamf Nation community that provides such great open source tools and collaboration. Them, along with Jamf support, have always had a lot of answers for me, getting issues on very specific API pain points while I was developing this. So, yeah, I do have the link up there to this presentation along with any code snippets that were presented if you want to take a closer look at anything. But any questions?
Yeah. Hey, so a bunch of questions have come in through here. So do you have any plans to support package uploads to the new JCDS 2.0?
Yeah, pretty much as long as there is API support for it, it should be in there, or will be once it's available.
Awesome. The XML to JSON tool was popular, so could you repeat the name of that tool?
Yeah, it's all one word, XML to dict. And then again, that will be in the speaker notes of the presentation from the link up there.
Got it, okay, nice. Will you support the full Jamf Pro API soon?
Oh, I should mention the Jamf, every single endpoint available in Classic and Pro API, every single endpoint is supported.
Already done. Wow.
Yeah, and then I do,
So
for
yes.
any new endpoints that are added, same day support typically.
Amazing. Does your tool or Jamf use certificates, SSO, or other methods to store usernames and passwords instead of having to enter it on the command line or having to store it in plain text?
Sorry, what was that again?
Does your tool use certificates, SSO, other methods to store usernames and passwords instead of having to enter it on the command line or having to store it in plain text?
No, not natively. You could, with the authentication method, you could provide your own instead of going through. But I should say we do also support the, as of the last version, we do provide the support for the API client authentication now. That was added in, 10.49?
Almost there. So is there a good parser for the data like JQ when the values returned are nested?
You know, I guess I've been working with it so long, I haven't really thought about that. It's usually I'll just open up Jamf's documentation or just see the returned information and then kind of work from there rather than, yeah.
Cool. And
I
then,
know there is a JSON package. I'm sure that there might be similar functionality to JQ in there.
last one, could you use the keyring project to project the JPS usernames and passwords? Protect, my bad.
Yeah, not something it supports right now, but I'd definitely be interested in looking into that.
Cool. So that is all the questions coming up from here. Are there any questions in the room before we call it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if you can shout or if you need this. Okay.
Sorry, what was that?
So, like, in order to call the classic client and intro client, right, is there any way or any alternative besides with, like, context manager or anything like that, in which we could just basically kind of create reusable functions that kind of create the client as well as make the call?
Yeah, for sure. You don't have to use with. It's just kind of my recommended way to do it. But you can just instantiate the class just completely normally.
Got it.
And then there is in the documentation how to like invalidate the token manually as well.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Anyone else? Cool. Okay. Well, I guess that's it. So, yeah, massive round of applause to Brian. That was a great session. Thank you, everyone.
Angels smoking cigarettes on rooftops in